Most people go through life believing they are their own person, making their own choices, forming their own opinions, and becoming who they were always meant to be. It's a comforting idea, isn't it? That we're each unique, free-willed individuals carving out our paths based on nothing more than inner truth and personal desire. But here's a confronting truth. What if that self-perception is largely an illusion? What if the version of you walk around with, the preferences, the priorities, the worldview, wasn't fully yours to begin with? From the moment we're born, every one of us is placed within a carefully structured framework designed to mold us before we're even capable of questioning it. Family, school, religion, media, all of these institutions don't just teach us, they shape us. Think about it. Were you encouraged to be curious, or were you encouraged to follow rules? Were you taught how to think, or what to think? In the name of discipline, tradition, and social order, we're trained not to question authority, not to disrupt norms, and not to think too far outside the box. That box is the mental cage, built slowly and skillfully. This strategy isn't new, and it's not always malicious in appearance. It often looks like guidance, good parenting, or standard education. But underneath, there are deeper intentions rooted in maintaining power and reducing chaos through conformity. Conformity, you see, is predictable, it's manageable. A person who questions everything is a destabilizing force to those who thrive on structure and order. So society learns how to nip that trait early. The rebel child is labeled trouble. The curious kid who asks too many questions is told to stay focused and stop interrupting. Over time, the message is enforced. Compliance is rewarded, and independence of thought is inconvenient at best and dangerous at worst. This conditioning doesn't stop in childhood. It just changes costumes. As adults, we're told we have choices, but those choices are often illusions. We're offered brands, ideologies, lifestyles, all packaged and pre-approved versions of identity, carefully crafted to make us feel like we're exercising free will. But how free can a decision be if all the options have been laid out for you by someone else? The range feels wide, but it's within the painted lines of unspoken social rules shaped by political interests, corporate agendas, and cultural engineering. This is where the Machiavellian element begins to reveal itself, not in overt control, not in chains or lockdowns, but in subtle manipulation. Silent influence, designing the boundaries of acceptable thoughts and behaviors so most people never realize they've been nudged their entire lives. In The Prince Machiavelli spoke about the necessity of manipulation in maintaining power. He didn't glorify it, he exposed it. And now that same strategy operates on a mass scale, through media programming, through influence marketing, through education systems that prioritize obedience over innovation. And we call it normal. What's worse is how invisible it becomes. When you're raised within a system, that system becomes your reality. You don't wake up questioning gravity, you just accept it. The same thing happens with social rules, norms, and beliefs. You don't think you're being controlled, you think you're being yourself. But how can you be yourself when you've never been allowed, never been encouraged to explore who you might have become without the weight of collective expectations? We tell kids to be themselves, while offering them zero tools to understand what their real self even is. We prepare young people for standardized tests, but never for internal exploration. We teach survival within the system, not freedom from it. And by the time someone dares to wake up and unlearn what they were taught, they're deep into adulthood, often confused, conflicted, and unsure why they feel so lost. That feeling of misalignment, that quiet discomfort, That's the authentic self-awakening, and recognizing it hasn't had a voice in a while. It's not that everyone who raised or taught you had malicious intent. Most people are just repeating what they themselves were taught. But the overall structure, the hidden architecture of control, doesn't need every participant to be aware of what they are doing. It just needs the cycle to continue. The result is clear. You live in a world where the surface screams freedom, but the programming runs deep. A world where people are walking around in roles carefully outlined by forces they can't even name. Roles that decide how they speak, what they believe, what they fear, and even who they think they are. And because it's all they've ever known, they rarely stop to ask, is this really who I am? Or is this just who I was told to be? And when you do start asking that question, everything changes. Because the system can't manipulate a mind that sees the strings. If you've ever looked around and wondered why the world feels more chaotic, more angry, and more divided than ever before, you're not alone. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to admit. Much of that division isn't just a natural consequence of different opinions. It's the product of intentional design. Because when people are distracted, when they are divided, they are easier to dominate. It's a calculated strategy, one that's been used throughout history and perfected in our modern world. The blueprint is ancient, but its execution today is more sophisticated and more invisible than ever before. This isn't the realm of wild conspiracy, it's the reality of power. Niccolo Machiavelli, in his writings, didn't theorize about lofty ideals or romantic notions of leadership. He studied power in its rawest form, how it's seized, how it's held, and how it's protected. And one of the key insights he laid bare was that it's often not strength or virtue that keeps power intact. It's manipulation. Subtle, psychological, long-game manipulation. Control the story, control the people. Divide them, distract them. Keep them focused on enemies that don't matter while the real puppeteers work behind the curtain. Every day you wake up and consume information on your phone, your television, your social media feed, and most of it is not information. It's distraction dressed up as urgency. You're being pulled in 10 directions before you've even had your first cup of coffee. Outrage over headlines, conflict over politics, arguments over identities. People are emotionally exhausted, mentally fragmented, constantly reacting instead of reasoning. And while everyone is busy being offended, entertained, or at war with someone online, very few are asking who set the stage for all of this drama in the first place. A divided public is a powerless public. When you scatter the masses into isolated factions arguing over which group is more oppressed, which ideology is more righteous, or who deserves to be cancelled, you ensure they never organize, never unify, never focus their energy on the system itself. The fighting continues in the arena while the emperors watch from the balcony, untouched, unaccountable, and smiling. This is no accident. Division is policy. It is the most effective strategy for maintaining control without ever having to show force. Now, the distraction part is just as critical. While division keeps people fighting with each other, distraction ensures they don't even realize what they've lost. Bread and circuses, as the ancient Romans called it. Give people enough entertainment, enough minor victories, enough dopamine hits from likes and follows, and they'll rarely question whether their minds are being expertly shaped away from substance. Keep them addicted to validation, to outrage, to comparison, and the system can do nearly anything while no one's looking. Real conversations get buried, real threats go unnoticed, and real freedom, mental, emotional, and psychological quietly evaporates. Control has evolved. It no longer relies solely on brute force. Today's power structures understand that the most effective control happens when the controlled are emotionally engaged but intellectually distracted. And what better way to do that than to get people emotionally charged about everything? When you're constantly in survival mode, socially, politically, or emotionally, you don't have the bandwidth to reflect or think critically. You're too busy defending your side, proving your worth, fighting your corner. Meanwhile, the narrative that shaped the battlefield goes unquestioned, and the people who benefit from it remain hidden. This is where Machiavellian strategy thrives, creating conflict not to solve it, but to sustain it. Look at how debate is framed today. It's not about understanding, it's about winning. It's not about nuance. It's about polarizing sound bites. If you dare to express a moderate view, you're attacked by both sides, as if reason itself is a threat to the machinery. And it is, because reason allows you to think beyond emotional manipulation. Once you start questioning the fight itself, who's benefiting, who's crafting the narrative, you begin to dismantle the system that profits from your division. And while many point fingers at this politician, or that media outlet, or that one influencer, the real architects are often nameless and faceless. The system isn't held up by a single villain, it's the result of decades of strategic conditioning, distraction, division, domination. It's a power structure that repeats across empires. What's changed is the level of technological precision. Your attention is a commodity. Your outrage is monetized. And your mind becomes a battlefield you're not even aware of, as long as you keep playing the game they designed. Here's the tragic part. If people knew how powerful they could be when united, the system would collapse overnight. If even 10% of people collectively refused to be manipulated, refused to take the bait, refused to participate in the manufactured outrage machine, it would send shockwaves through every institution built on passive obedience. That's why unity is discouraged. That's why self-awareness is dangerous to systems of power. Because a mind that knows it's being manipulated becomes unpredictable, impossible to cage, and incredibly hard to govern. And once you understand this pattern, that they keep you divided to keep you small, you stop fighting against each other and start fighting for your collective liberation. We tend to think of warfare as something loud and violent: tanks, bombs, armies in uniform. But the most effective wars aren't waged with guns anymore. They're waged in silence, in scrolls, in words, in emotion. Psychological manipulation has become the new battlefield, and your mind is the territory being captured. The power structures we talked about, those that shape your identity and keep you emotionally distracted and divided, don't need to meet you in combat. They just need to influence how you think, feel, and see the world. If they can do that, there's nothing left to fight for. They already own the most valuable weapon, your perception. Today, control isn't just about laws, prisons, or armies. It's about suggestions. It's about slowly dripping influence into your subconscious until you don't resist, because you think the thoughts in your head are your own. And that's what makes this strategy far more dangerous than any brute force. The fact that it's invisible. If you were chained, you'd feel it. You'd push back. But when you're manipulated into believing the cage doesn't exist, you decorate it. You defend it. You cling to it like it's freedom. And how does this happen? Through media, through culture, through the repetition of carefully chosen ideas. You are exposed to messages every single day that shape your beliefs, not just about the world, but about yourself. What you should look like, what you should believe, who you should trust, what success means, what failure looks like. All of it fed into you in ways you don't even notice. Algorithms decide what you see. Headlines decide what you fear. Trends decide what you value. And over time, you become a mirrored version of what the system wants, not because you thought it through, but because it was easier that way. This isn't accidental. Emotional manipulation is a technique that's been evolved to perfection. That's why so much of modern life revolves around identity and validation. Advertisements don't sell products anymore, they sell feelings. Social media doesn't show events. It shows curated realities designed to trigger desire or insecurity. You aren't just scrolling for fun. You're scrolling through layers of emotional influence engineered to hook your attention and shape your mind. And every time you react, whether it's awe, outrage, jealousy, or shame, you're becoming more predictable, more programmable. It's often said that data is the new oil, but it's more than that. Data is the blueprint to your psychological profile. It gives corporations and institutions the power to predict your behavior, push your buttons, tailor content to your fears and hopes, all in real time. You are nudged towards certain thoughts and feelings based on nothing more than patterns in your clicks, your likes, your hesitations. You're being profiled and then steered not with commands, but with illusions of choice. The irony is, we think we're more informed today than at any other point in history. But knowing 100 surface-level facts doesn't make you wise. It just makes you overloaded. And this information overflow is part of the manipulation. When you're overwhelmed, you default to shortcuts. You seek trusted voices that may already be complicit in the systems of control. You accept consensus instead of insight. Popularity becomes a substitute for truth. The need to belong overpowers the need to question. And so, people go along with narratives that don't make sense. They believe things they haven't actually examined. They defend ideas they never truly chose. Not because they're weak or stupid, but because the psychological warfare has been so consistent, so immersive, that resisting it looks like madness from the outside. Those who do try to step out of the matrix are often mocked, labeled extremists, or told they're conspiracy theorists. The system defends itself through ridicule, because ridicule works better than repression. If the dissenters can be made to look foolish, no violence is needed. Machiavelli understood this in spirit, even if he didn't live in our information age. His assertion was simple and brutal. It's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But fear today looks different. It's not always fear of punishment. It's fear of being excluded, cancelled, ridiculed. The fear is social now, not physical, and with that, control doesn't come from the top down. It's enforced laterally. Ordinary people, trained by years of manipulation, now police each other. They silence different views, not realizing they're acting as tools of a larger system that benefits when dissent is self-policed. So here we are living in a world where silence is labeled peace, compliance is labeled intelligence, and groupthink is labeled progress. Where real clarity is drowned in noise, truth isn't hidden, it's buried under layers of carefully selected half-truths, emotional distractions, and psychological conditioning. And most people don't even realize they've been recruited into a war for their own mind. But once you see it, once you tune into how much of your reality has been subtly shaped instead of consciously chosen, you can never unsee it. You begin to notice the manipulation in everything, and that's the first step toward freedom. Because the only war they truly fear is the one you win by waking up. By the time most people realize something feels off, they're already years deep into the programming. They can't quite put their finger on it, just a lingering sense that their life isn't fully theirs, like they're going through the motions, following a script they never wrote. And that sense of misalignment, that quiet discontent that creeps in during moments of stillness, is often the very first sign that the mind is trying to wake up. That the real you, the one buried underneath years of conditioning, is slowly starting to resist. But here's the hard part. Awareness doesn't feel like victory at first. It feels like chaos. The moment you begin to open your eyes, everything looks different. The systems you trusted, the truths you learned, the paths you followed, they all come into question. And that can be terrifying. It's why most people never take the plunge. They may feel something's wrong, but they talk themselves out of it. They pull the blanket of routine back over their head and convince themselves that discomfort is just part of growing up. But what if it's not? What if it's not growing pains, but growing out of the version of you they trained you to be? Once you begin to peel back the layers, you see that so many of your choices weren't born from free thought. They were inherited, incentivized, or influenced. Your preferences, your politics, your values, even your idea of success, were all slowly molded by forces that never asked what you wanted. They just needed you to fit the mold. But the mold was never made for your freedom. It was made for your obedience. And this is where the shift happens, the moment when self-awareness becomes your greatest act of resistance. Because once you become conscious of how your mind has been shaped, you start to reclaim the tools they once used against you. You stop participating in your own programming. You start asking different questions, not just what should I do, but why do I believe that in the first place? There is so much power in that why. Because that's the crack in the wall. That's where the light gets in. But don't expect applause. This path isn't popular. Society doesn't reward those who question the script. It tends to punish them. The moment you break free from a narrative, people will label you. Not because they see the truth, but because your freedom threatens their comfort. You become a mirror reflecting to others what they're too afraid to look at within themselves. And that's part of the cost of consciousness. You lose the old world, the familiar illusions. But in return, you gain yourself. And that's the truth we've been circling this entire time. The enemy isn't just external, it's internal. It's the part of you that's been conditioned to stay docile, to seek approval, to avoid conflict, to doubt your intuition. That's what you're really up against, not the politicians, not the media, not the culture wars. It's the part of you that was trained to need the system. So how do you reclaim your mind? You start by becoming brutally honest with yourself. You examine your beliefs not to justify them, but to interrogate them. You stop consuming information passively and start decoding it. You question the narratives you've been fed, even the ones that once felt sacred. You pay attention to your emotions not to be ruled by them, but to recognize when you're being emotionally triggered by design. The goal isn't to live in paranoia, it's to live in precision. Awareness turns you into someone who knows why you do what you do, why you want what you want, why you fear what you fear. And once you begin to understand that, you're no longer a pawn in someone else's strategy. You're writing your own playbook. You start choosing your influences deliberately. You cut off sources of manipulation, not because someone told you to, but because your mind has developed filters. Discernment becomes your defense, and from that place, not only do you free yourself, you become someone who can't be easily manipulated again. You become a threat, not with weapons, with clarity. That clarity, that level of inner sovereignty, is the greatest power a person can possess in a world built on deception. When you operate from awareness, they can't predict you. You don't take the bait. You don't believe every headline. You don't follow every trend. You move different. You think slower. You act with intention. And that's exactly what they don't want, because an aware human being shrinks the control system with every step they take forward. And slowly, the cage loses its grip, not because someone opened the door for you, but because you realized it was never locked to begin with. And once you take that step through, there is no going back, only waking up